By the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to invest in ETFs from beginning until the end. And at the end, I'm going to show you 2 ETFs that you can buy depending on how old you are and where you are in your investing journey. So stay tuned because I'm going to cover everything in ETFs that you need to know in pretty much the next couple of minutes. Okay, cool. So here's the first thing that you need to know about ETFs. What is an ETF? First of all, an ETF is an exchange traded fund, right? That's all it is. Now, the F word, right? The F there is important because what it is a fund. Now, what is the essence of a fund? Let's define the fund really quickly. A fund means that you are taking a bunch of other assets, pooling money together to buy these pretty much companies, businesses, etc., right? Perhaps even real estate. But that's what an ETF fund, that's what the F in ETF means, meaning they're pooling money together to buy these assets. So then what assets are they buying? Well, it depends on the ETF. There are ETFs that pool money together so that they can go ahead and buy technology companies. There are ETFs that pool their money together. Remember, this is a fund. They pool their money together to go and buy real estate. They pool their money together to go and buy technology stocks, energy stocks, car stocks, international companies, right? In countries outside of the US, in countries, in Southeast Asia. There are literally ETFs for everything that you can think of. There is an ETF, for example, that perhaps will just buy 4 or 5 companies or 10 companies, right? That's an ETF. But a fund is really, you're buying into the fund, and then the fund goes out and buys other assets, other companies. So that's what a fund is. Now, exchange traded, to complete what the ETF means, is that you can actually buy these funds on the exchanges that exist in the USA. That's the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and the Dow, right? So it's pretty simple. Now, most of these are traded on the S&P 500, right? So when we're talking about where do you find these ETFs? You can find them from, pretty much any major commercial bank. You're looking at Bank of America, Chase Bank, they all offer ETFs to their clients. Charles Schwab, you name it, all of them have ETF offerings to offer. Well, if you want to buy these assets, we will pool our money together and then go buy it for you. So you can get in for a lot cheaper without having to try to pick which stocks that you want. Okay, cool. So then you can actually think about why is it that when, this is not about crypto at all, but just a side note. Why is it that when ETFs for crypto came out, like a Bitcoin ETF or an Ethereum ETF comes out, why is that such a popular thing? Well, you may not be able to buy an entire Bitcoin, which as of this writing is probably $68,000, $69,000, but you can get into this ETF, which is an exchange traded, remember, fund. We're going to pool our money together and buy Bitcoin or buy Ethereum or buy other cryptos so that you can get the exposure. If it goes up, you get some of that gain. If it goes down, you don't lose all your money, right? So then that makes it really cool. And that's why big banks started offering that to their clients. BlackRock is buying so much Bitcoin right now for their ETFs. Again, it's not BlackRock buying, it's the people who are putting into the fund, because remember, it's an ETF, the fund, to go and buy these assets. Okay, cool. So then going back to traditional ETFs, not crypto, but other companies. So then we're pooling our money together. That's what an exchange traded fund is. Okay, so then now we're going about it. When we pool our money together, what do we buy? So let's say I take this $100. Boom. I give you $100 and I say I want to buy into your ETF. I want to know what exactly am I buying? Yes, I know that your ETF is called, Sky. Okay, let's say your ETF is called Sky. But what actual companies are you going to be buying with that $100 in your fund? Okay, cool. So if I give you $100, here would be their answer, right? I'm going to buy $14 of Apple. I'm going to buy $26 of Google. I'm going to buy $13 of Tesla. I'm going to buy $20, etc., and the list goes on, right? So I'm going to buy some Palantir. I'm going to go ahead and buy some Microsoft. I'm going to buy some NVIDIA, and then whatever the composition of that $100 is what you'd be getting access to when you buy that ETF. So I hope you're starting to see this. This is a basket of companies that you're pulling together that you are buying into once and getting access to 20, 10, 5, 50 companies at once. It's a really cool thing. What's the benefit of doing that though? Okay, so I started by saying the benefit to most people is that we don't really pick stocks very well. I mean, think about this. How many people picked NVIDIA 2 years ago? NVIDIA went up 400% in 2 years. More than that. Did you know it was going to do that? No. But the ETFs that had exposure to them, they got the benefit of NVIDIA rising. Right? So then you didn't have to necessarily pick NVIDIA. You just had to pick an ETF that was focused on technology and the biggest technology companies in America. I'll give you another example. Let's say you had picked, for example, you bought Square. Now Square is still down over 80% from where its peak was. Now people thought Square would going to do pretty well. But if you bought Square individually, then what you're risking now is all of your money going down 80%. But if you bought the ETF that had Square in it, that's only a small portion of your ETF. You see the difference? So then if Square goes down, even if it goes down too much, you know what the ETF is going to do? They're going to trash Square and replace it with something else that's performing. So you don't have to do that work. So then you don't get all of the bottom side and you don't have to go out and pick stocks, which is actually very, very beneficial. Of course, what's the downside of ETFs? We have to cover the downside, right? It's not all rosy. It's not all rose-tinted glasses. The downside is if, for example, NVIDIA goes up 400%, if you're in an ETF, you actually don't get that full 400% of everything that you invested. Because remember, if you gave them $100 and NVIDIA goes up 400%, you don't now have $400. No, because remember, with that $100, you only bought maybe $14 or $15 or $20, whatever the composition in that ETF is of NVIDIA. So then your $15 of your $100 is what went up 400%. So then you do lose some of the top line of benefit of revenue if you are looking for maximizing your returns. But let's take a cost benefit analysis. What we know so far is that the average person is horrible at picking stocks. And you're probably watching this, especially if you're a beginner, you don't necessarily need to go out and study the stock market because there are people who dedicate their entire lives to doing that. And let me tell you what their results are. 80% or more of hedge funds, these are people who we pay to beat the stock market, 80% of them do not. More than 80%. More than 80%. Only 10% of hedge funds actually beat the stock market. Now, remember, this is what they're paid to do. If, for example, we were paying cars to perform and take us from A to B, but 80% of the time the car didn't get us there, do you think that we would allow that to continue? No, but we allow hedge funds to keep trading our money, even though they're actually not doing the thing that they say that they're going to do. Now, I'm not sure about you, but that's a problem. Now, if you send this to your hedge fund friend, they might get upset. Your money manager friends, they might get upset. But the stats are there. I'm not making up these stats, right? Most hedge funds do not beat the market. So then, if you're thinking that you're an individual, I would actually rather have control over my money. If the market is beating most people 80% or more of the time, then you might as well get into a fund that is at least on the market. So that's why I love ETFs. Exchange traded funds are the best instrument for any beginner to start their investing journey because it gets them in without taking all of the risk that most people will fall into the trap and lose all of their money. And it also gets the benefit that if something goes up, then you get the benefit. Okay, cool. So at the beginning, I told you that I would tell you 2 ETFs that you could get right now that are performing well, getting the stock market returns, and doing amazing. So if you're young, this is if you are under 30, maybe I'd even push this to 35, 38, right? If you are under 30, there's an ETF called VGT. It's by Vanguard, and you can Google this. And what I want you to Google is that I want you to Google the average annual return over the last 15 years or 20 years. What you're going to see for VGT, Google it right now, is that the average return is 14, 15, 16, 17, 18%. Why? Because these stocks are the biggest technology stocks in America, which are the biggest companies in the world. Think Meta, think Nvidia, think Google, think Microsoft, think Apple. These are the companies that are guiding and pushing the economy of the US. $1 trillion companies. So then, if you are investing into a fund that buys these companies, of course they are going to perform better than average. Remember, the average stock market return is only 10%. So then getting 14, 15, 16, 17, 18% is amazing. And that's what VGT has been doing because of the selection of the companies in that fund. VGT, that's the first one. You want to do that, especially if you're young. The reason why I say that is because if you're young, then you have time to get that growth. You're not necessarily looking for income, you're looking for growth. You're not necessarily looking for stability. You are looking for growth, just explosive growth. Okay? But if you are on the other side of life and you want something that's stable to protect your investments, if you are, 45, looking to retire, 65, 70 even, right, then you're going to probably want to shift your strategy a little bit. And now, I'm not saying if you're 50, you should choose only the next one I'm about to tell you, but you may want to not have your entire portfolio or most of your portfolio in VGT because it can be volatile. As we know, tech does that. However, the second one is VOO. Now, VOO tracks the S&P 500, all 500 stocks. You see how wonderful that is? Now, VOO, if the stock market is doing average 10% a year, then that's what VOO is going to do. Which means that you are not only beating inflation, which in the US tends to be between 3 and 4%, however, or between 2 to 4%. However, you are also getting plus 10% and stability, because these are the biggest companies in America. S&P 500, you can think again, Apple, Nvidia, you still get access to these companies, but you also get companies like Walmart, right? That are stable, like Coca-Cola, which are stable. So you don't necessarily need to change stuff that often. So then VOO should be more of your portfolio the older you are. And you also have some of the dividend aristocrats, which are companies that pay dividends for the past couple of decades and have shown an increasing dividend payout over the years. These are dividend aristocrats, so then you get that income from your portfolio as well. Nvidia, for example, doesn't necessarily do a dividend payout yet, and Apple's dividend payout is kind of tiny, right? But these are growth stocks, which is why people hold them. But then you have other companies that are consistently paying out those dividend stocks to reward their investors for holding them. That's companies that you want to hold in VOO. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. It's a technical jargon right there. However, I know that you're probably going to go ahead and do your own research. Look for VGT and VOO. Understand that ETFs are the best instrument out there for investing, especially if it's your first time. Okay, guys, by the way, if you haven't subscribed already, I know a lot of you are watching, but you haven't subscribed yet. If you check right here, there's actually more content to watch, but you can only watch that if you subscribe. So subscribe right now. I'll see you next week, guys. Peace.